Okay, this is a new article that just came out today, well, yesterday now, and it's on Gobekli Tepe and some of the things that they found there, some more recent finds and things, and I've looked into a few papers, so I'm going to add onto this also what was said. They said they're still excavating Gobekli Tepe and what's been most recently discovered. It's one of the world's biggest mysteries. Gobekli Tepe is still being explored, and experts have been recently unearthed some intriguing relics. Here's a picture of it here. I'll try to get that somewhat centered. And what they found was something that looks somewhat like San Urfa man, and I cannot make out what this is here. Looks like his head broke off, and being in the till and the junk that was here, it broke in little chips to it, but they can tell it matched up to it. The surface of this looks real abrasive, like it could be rubbed off real easily and stuff, and it's probably limestone or sandstone, something of that nature. They say this is supposed to be a woman and a Venus type statue, I'm guessing. In the other papers, they refer to different statues and things that they found, don't tell you the size of them, and there ain't no picture. But they say it's a Venus statue, and of course, all the older Venus statues are not shown as being like Inanna and so on in the Perpetual Virgin, but the Mother. And that even talked about, I think this may even be the old crone type situation. They say her arms are here and she's holding on to something. Quite often in some of these depictions, she's holding up her breast, but in this, it looks like she's holding up perhaps a basket or something in her. And other people have said, no, this is a baby she's holding in front of her. And so this is an effigy that's kind of like mom and a baby, baby Jesus looking ones, Horus, Isis type thing and stuff. And you can kind of make out still, like there's the mouth and there's the nose and here's the eye. And it still seems to have a dot right there in the eye. But the hair seems to be brushed back and there's a carving right on here. And I guess that looks like the ear and maybe something sticking up too, like behind her ear she had a flower or who knows. But I also noticed that right here, let's zoom in on this, that right here I see a circular pattern that looks like, oh my god, it's going to reset. I see a circular pattern on that. We'll go back in on it, which to me looks like a bigger circle that's this big, with this little circle that I'm sitting in right now with a star in it. It's almost like there's a crescent like this and a star right below it, right there. Kind of hard to tell, and it just, looks like it's been eroded away so much. And I guess the important thing for me in this is they say that they're about to start, redoing a next season out there due to the end of the last season being somewhere, I guess, in February. They took time off, then this thing all happened and stuff. But one of the researchers, maybe one of these guys that are here, was saying that he had 2 more seasons at least to work there, and something in my mind got me thinking that he's using this for his dissertation and his thing like deal. In fact, what's being shown here, if you look, is a little green stick that's been stuck in here, and this is part of a wall. And apparently they found something of note, and in doing so, he's coming over with the little brushes. But what they're doing here is just gathering up small amounts, nowhere near as deep as your driveway in concrete in each time, and they're putting them in these little buckets and stuff. They're kind of going through it whenever they look at it, see if they see any things like these objects. But then they take it to a guy that screens it and everything that's on down the way. So they dump it into a wheelbarrow type device and take it down usually and stuff. And there's a pit area where they've been doing that at. And so what I've been told is that they were asking, these people what their plans are, and the guy said that he had 2 seasons left on there, and of course he's not in a season now. So that's intriguing. And they said that they were shutting it down, and I think that's been misconstrued by journalists and somewhat, and I consider myself to have done the same type of thing. For what he's saying is, we're going to finish what we've done here. Well, they found all this extra little parts of it, and they started doing minor excavation to it, and then they concentrated on the part with Klaus Schmidt going through, and they had other people working on it. Because this guy says there's people working on it now. And they show a picture with some people having the face masks on, but they're also doing the dirty digging and stuff, and quite often they'll put one of those on when they're doing dirt. For all I know, that's propagandish type picture from 2 years ago. Because, you know, when they do it here and they do it in Egypt and stuff, they get a lot of sand and dirt kicked up and everything. So they wear masks and stuff like that. So let's get into these 10 different things they talk about. But before we go, I just want to look at where we are here on this other picture here. Let's see if I can go in just a little more on it. You know, something's neat on this hill, but I wonder what's neat on that hill right up there. To the eye, it looks like it's probably a natural hill, but then didn't this to everybody for 10,000 years? We've been waiting for some new information to come out on this, and they apparently have got it. One of the papers said that they have multiple. So I don't know, is this the 2 that are over here, or do they have 100? They didn't say, no numbers, no description, but multiple artifacts that they found. And some of the artifacts are just found in the till. So whenever everything was thrown back in here, it's not like it was stood up whenever they left or anything else. It appears to be just thrown in with all the gravel and rock chips and building pieces and things like that that are shoveled into it. If you look right here, we can see a long line, it looks like, going down through this whole run. In the distance, you can see a fence that's set up here, and then it kind of goes in and back out, and then there's the fence that's over here. For all I know, the potato chip's right over here, which is what it looks like it may be the case. Sure, we don't see it right here. But this is a whole area that they're going to apparently, like he said, finish off what we've done, or what we've gotten done, and then stop, maybe saving some for a future generation. So you'll hear it goes from the point of saying they've only done 5% to they've done 15%, to somebody saying after we get through here it'll be about 30. But they also don't know whether some of these cleared out areas that are over here, like behind the over shoulder, contain stuff too. They just didn't have it peekabooing out of the rock. This whole area that they are right now had some rocks and some T-pillars sticking up a little bit, and that little ridge that they found. And so they started going down that ridge. If this is where I think it is, we'll get some overhead shots in a minute. And so they started running down that ridge, but there's nothing saying that there's not a subset right down below it, just to your right, and more stuff to the left. In fact, you can see in the video or in the overhead shots how up to the left there's a lot of stuff, and around over the whole thing, and the whole mound has been done, and they've only done this slice of the pie that I was talking about. So it might be one of the most significant discoveries in the world, and the world has ever seen or known about. It's going to reset again. Maybe one of the most significant discoveries the world has ever known about our past. Located in the southern Anatolia region of Turkey, this archaeological wonder continues to reveal truths about the ancient world that many previously people never considered. With every artifact and ancient ruin, it reveals itself. Scientists and archaeologists are able to better create a picture of what civilization looked like thousands of years ago. Indeed, just the sight of this reset things. In another video I'm going to do accompanying this, may even put it out directly after, we talk about Graham Hancock and how he was vindicated by this find himself, because he had been talking about ancient civilizations and other people, and that Sumerians in places didn't just pop out of popcorn. And archaeology was showing all these different things, but not going back that far. And then all of a sudden, this seems to have doubled the amount of time. And the amount of intricate work that's done here, you can tell this, again, is not just popcorn. They don't popcorn out of nowhere and make T-pillars with bas relief things and stuff like that. There's no way you can connect that. And this is not a cave painting that still are incredible and show some astronomical science and things like that. This is something that shows sacred geometry in it and all kinds of things, and the precursor to Stonehenge. But when we look at that and we say it's 3,000 years ago or whatever, at the same type idea, you say, well, that's 3,000, this is over 10,000. And so it triples that. Pretty neat. I've pretty much got over the potato chip here, guys, because in reading one of these articles, which is just a bunch of words and no pictures at all except for the opening picture, which is the one that everybody's seen from 2014, they talk about how the erosion effect is going to be 10 to 100 times less over the long period for them having this structure, and the fact that it's kind of set in here, than it would be just wide out in the open. I'm thinking about that, where people will be able to see the intricacy of the carvings and things 10,000 years again from now, where opposed if you had it outside, by then it would be a shadow of its former self, and there'd be a bunch of pictures you'd go in this place and see, and this is the way it looked like when we didn't protect it in some way. I mean, they protected it burying up under stuff, so why don't we do it? So I thought whenever they were trying to say that we're going to finish off what we've done, that they're basically going to finish this off, clean this place up pretty good, finish off the areas in between that they never did because the walkways are no longer there, and head out. It appears that that's not the case whatsoever, that there are people that have digs that are all over the place. It's just they're not digging here anymore. And I'm like, oh, well, if you'll look, this whole area here was never dug. You can see this sinks down in and come over here, and it sinks down into there, and it sinks even farther down into here and here, so that it's staggered levels that they have going on. But they didn't dig out anywhere in between here and this whole run that goes back here. They didn't dig out in between these two walls. They didn't dig out. And here, not to be a fearmonger or anything, guys, but oh my God, what's it doing? Not to be a fearmonger or anything, guys, but what's strange is, man, if they ever had a earthquake in this area, wow. These things are going to start going, flopping. And they have some of them that are pinned up. Still to this day, there's wood around this one, and there's wires holding up some over here. But the rest of them are able to stand up on their own, amazingly, and the little pedestals that are carved in with these things stood up into, like a peg in a board, but it's only like 7 or 8 inches deep, and that's just incredible. They're able to balance them to that point, too. Think about that. Just come out like popcorn, do something like that. But what worries me about this also is that this whole area right here might be the room of the statues, or the room of the gods, that you didn't know, and they didn't carry them away from here because they're huge statues sitting in here, and no one's ever going to know. In fact, even if you do the rest of it, chances of you coming back and doing this spot, I mean, if you're going to leave it like this, you can still see the old scaffolding, if you will, that took you across this place, because you can walk through here, right? You can walk through there, right? And come out. But then that kind of ends, and so it's kind of like you used to walk back here and go across and walk across there to get over here, and so on. There's another place back here, but if you look at this wall right here that's just hitting us under this whole ledge, that's just solid, and there's stuff all in that, all the way back there. And if I'm not mistaken, that way, or maybe up in this direction, is that line. That may be part of it we're seeing right there that they're working on still to this day. And, I lamented somewhat about how they had this structures going around, and really you could go down close to these things, and all I had to do was Gilligan something better. But you can tell this is done a whole lot better. And apparently they went down to bedrock with every bit of it and stuff, but I'm just worried that they crushed something cool going down and finding bedrock. Just the amount of people that are up here on this ledge, if they were to try to walk across this thing right here, would fail. So there's no way they should have that as any type of setup. And I wasn't saying leave it like this, but whenever they had it like this and the extra parts all through here, you were literally walking right to it, walking right around it, walking right here, walking right there, and you were a whole lot closer than you were. And you don't get to see the sky at night, which would, during the day this is fantastic and you get to see a lot, but during at night, if they had the ability for you to see the stars come over and then they had some kind of presentation, thing, it'd be pretty cool. But anyhow, so it's an important site to learn about. They talk about that. Some basics here is what this is really going over, and I'm just going to tag on extra basics. 15 mega monumental temples were uncovered a few years back. Now, they originally said that this may go as many as 50 of them, but you talk about 50 of the circles, and we found out that they work off of sacred geometry, but the squares and the cubits that are around it and the amount of structures, and this is going to be really looked at as eventually as a pseudo city, that there would be people living here long period of time, perhaps their whole lives, some sacred priests of the temple of Syrinx idea, and that there would be a lot of pilgrimages to the area and things like that they believe. But there's another strange thing about that. For looking at the grain, even that's out there and they call it wild, it's not non-manipulated. It has a percentage of change to it. And then when you see the change between here and Sumeria, there's been a large amount of change too. But between here and Sumeria, we're talking about almost 5,000 years of its beginnings. And so there was enough time for them to have crossbred and done things, just like we've turned a wild beast into a cow that's real domesticated looking, cats, birds, all kinds of things, chicken. So really doesn't take too long apparently to do that, but these circles are real neat. I've got another one coming out about sacred geometry, but I'm waiting on somebody who's supposed to, 2 months late, have a paper out on it. And I think it's better whenever you have something like a paper that's out on sacred geometry, because most people look at that as like a fluke science somehow. And so what if they line up? What does that mean? And you're like, well, they keep lining up. There's all this stuff that's going on. So they talk about being the oldest temple in the world, and here's a nighttime shot with some floodlights they have going on it, and the sun's just gone down. And I wonder if they let you get in here. See, what would be neat is they let you get in here and be real respectful, but walk through and into an area here, and then tell you with this presentation perhaps what all's going on, and then click off the lights and let your eyes adjust to the fact of the heavens going over, although it looks real overcast in there. And they deem that this is the way people were building it, and they're carving these stones out of really the surface itself, making flat spots where they put all these things, and then building them all right. And there's domiciles and things like that too. They would have been 2 stories and so on like that, but showing all kinds of things. The idea they may have trapped some animals and kept them in cages and things like that, and captured things and waited for certain amounts of time, and all the hunter-gatherers working together, and these group of people with this, got to be hemp rope, basically lifting up these pillars. They have that little arm wrapped around the side, but what this would have looked like, basically. And how much significance does this have? Well, really, in archaeology, I can't state enough that whenever you can get something to go a couple of 100 years and change history, people freak out. But whenever you've basically doubled, it really blows the cork out of that champagne bottle. The only problem with it is, because it's so old, they don't want to give it any credit. They don't want to keep showing you things like bread mill stuff that they show, where they actually have the little thing, which was used all the way in societies, even 1900s till now. Basically, if you didn't have a mill or milling stones, that's what you were using. But they tell you that many sites within the primary keep popping up. And so even they looked more and more and more and more, and see the floor, how they've made it solid. But this hasn't even gotten to the floor yet in this place, and these people have dug down to the bottom of these pillars, I guess, that are here. And this is the super tall ones that are here. These people are standing on a wall that's no longer there anymore, but some of these places they left like that. They might have something cool in it. Right now it's just full of till, but there might be something cool. They keep finding some artifacts in these places. And this is that vulture stone. We're going to talk about that in the other video. Can you see how this next level is just a flat piece? Well, they cleared off a little bit here, but all this is crap. And there's another wall right there. So there's something here that's 12, 15 foot wide, maybe more, and they only have 6 foot of it done there, or something along that line. So they talk about it being, it's not a single place of worship in just one temple type thing, but there's just so many of these places, and it shows you that they may have even had a plethora of gods, already had a whole thing going on, with, is it 12 gods, or what is it going on? Wouldn't it be neat to find out over time that some of these temples were dedicated to a certain star, or a certain planet, a wandering star, if you will? Well, they know that the one that's over there that has the jaguar thing was the only one found with a female edifice, and it looks like she's mother having a baby type situation. And I said before that was found in there, maybe that has something to do with females, just by the look of it. And this one has a look of more like this maybe, and this maybe, of course people are just taking shots and guesses at things right now, and I'm not seeing anything that they talk about in context quite often, and they make little statements, and sure they can say enclosure B and enclosure D, but you don't know what they're referencing half the time, and sometimes they don't say enclosure D or B or so on, so you don't know what they're talking about unless they explicitly say the bas-relief jaguar. So it's not just one though. And they found some 200 pillars at the site. So right there in the first shot under the potato chip, we were looking at 20 or so. And so huge amount of difference in there. With every excavation period or season, more of the fascinating ruins spring forth. It wasn't until 1996 the scientific community took the area seriously, and much more sits under the earth. In the end, many more circles and spaces of worship could see the sun. And yeah, I don't even know if I've ever mentioned this except for in like the oldest video. It's this place that they actually thought was medieval, perhaps Templar time burial grounds. Let me put this in here. And they thought these burial places, because all they're seeing is the top of these pillars, right? So these burial places, they're thinking that just may be flat headstones and there's no writing on it and stuff, and they just pretty much discounted it. Klaus Schmidt got this site, and probably they gave it to him not thinking it's really anything, and it turns into quite the incredible change. It challenges thoughts on beginnings of agriculture. So a lot of people think that the ancient Caucasian Egyptians here started it out in their culture with the Badarians that came down, the Kata cultures and stuff, that they had that. But they've noted long ago that they're taking Anatolian stuff from like cattle Hoyuk and places, those same type of Botoris but domesticated cattle, and grains from Sumer and stuff into there whenever they do that. So it showed you an earlier connection that all these people had that were farmers growing the same types of grain, which had been passed around from each other from long before that. But in my findings, just something I'll mention here, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but in my findings, you look at all these skulls of people back then, and they say as soon as you come out into farming and things out of hunter-gatherer, you lose prognathism. And so more of a flattened face and so on. And they can prove that and show you with certain groups of people still existing around the world today, and people that were recent primitives, and how that is an effect. But Cro-Magnon man has an extremely low amount of, if not total lack of prognathism. And so that shows you something different. And then again, when we did a video here a couple of years ago on hunter-gatherers, I talked about how Ma and Pa used to hunter-gather. Little house on the prairie, and Pa would hunt and gather and stuff. Sure, they had the mill thing, and they had a common place where people that were doing this and doing that would get together and sell their stuff for stuff that they needed. And, you know, it's all based on currency then, but back in this time, it's pretty much bartering with what you needed. But it changes everything on the ideals of it. And so, at least even right now, they're willing to admit that, well, whenever they showed up here, they weren't farmers, they were hunter-gatherers. But when they left out of here, they were going to start being farmers. Maybe there's more to it than that, because there's been 6 or 7 places found that match up to this technology that goes on. Did they break up when they left here and start mimicking it other places like you would think instantly? No, because a couple of these places apparently on early dating date older than this. But they haven't dug this place to even know how old it goes. It could be the circle that's dating 10,500 BC is one of the last ones they did, and as you go around, it's older and older. It could be, you know, it could be a lot of things, but it does look like they left the site at about 9,600. Well, at least that's what's showing here, but they may have actually been in some other position, you know, so that they haven't even dug yet. You'll never know what they'll find in these places if they never dig it. This thing keeps resetting on me. Sorry, guys. It could be because I've got it pulled down. You can see the immense size of this circle. There's people wearing blue. There's 2 of them here standing inside there. I think I've got some equipment or something in there too. It's huge. Huge. The concept of how big it is kind of overwhelming, and how large it totally is. So it's not just some site. I mean, we think of Stonehenge as being this big circle of the giants and this thing that just it's giant, you know, and it's unbelievably huge. And yet here's places which aren't as big, but there's 30 to 50 of them. And so it's the largest archaeological site, dating way off into the periods of the Sumerians and things that have things that, you know, where we find temples and things that actually could go along with this. But this is almost all temperature and things like that, with some living space, of course, what they've done so far. And so that it shows you some oddity with it too. It couldn't be that this is the first time everybody got together and then they all just started building like crazy, you know, and you want to make believe it came up like popcorn and they got this idea, hey, will you build these circles? Well, let's put circles together. And they did it one time out of popcorn. That's not what they're looking at. Definitely not what they're looking at. They've uncovered several skulls at Gobekli Tepe. There's 3. Each with deeply chiseled markings. They were found at the site. The bones are the first of their kind to be discovered in this region. They seem to have been deliberate puncture wounds and in them, not made by animals. Therefore, the intact skulls were found. Researchers have gathered thousands of animal bones and hundreds of bone fragments of Gobekli Tepe. And they've tried to say that it's this skull cult that they might have had and so on. Well, if you look at the cultures that came out of this that we were studying 20 years ago and the oldest, these people had a skull cult concept too, where they would leave these bodies out, you know. Rodents, and some people said they would let dogs chew at them for a while and stuff, then they take the head off of it. And but in reality, what we find going back way past even this time here is people are doing things where they take a body and they put it up on a dais, and whether that's tall or not, and they burn them, and so they become smoke and go into the clouds and become part of the Milky Way. Or they let birds take them away, and this led to the concept of angels, and the vultures definitely have a lot to do with this. So this vulture symbology, and the vulture stele, and why a lot of people freak out about it, because that's a symbology that goes with death, and there's a headless person here, and they say, oh, were they doing sacrifice and stuff? I'm telling you, I think not. I think that's the symbology of death. just by showing you that, the headless person. They can show somebody laying on the ground, but short of them drawing X's over their eyes, I mean, or arrows in them. Well, he didn't die from arrows. You know, what happened? Well, he's not him, he's people. A lot of people died, and they recorded on the thing here, and so do they show you a bunch of people? No, they show you the handbags of life, and that just puts a whole emphasis on the situation at the top of the pillar. Each one has a little symbol to go along with it too, and I want their interpretations of what that is for each one. But that whole thing lays out like Cyrus, and so that was the one that they looked at so much, you know, and then Sirius. And I'm going to do another video about that here shortly, what some people have come together with the original name of Gobekli Tepe, for there was one before. But boom. So there's these skulls that they had here, and what's weird about them too is they're swathed in red ochre, and so that goes with the red ochre burials. So we can carry this type of behavior, maybe not exactly these people, but people doing the same thing back tens of thousands of years. And so that definitely makes the connection go that much farther whenever you find red ochre burials and da-da-da, and then this pottery and who. Now they go, well, these people, who are the ancient Neptunes, look how good the teeth are still there. You can still see the red ochre staining that's on this. Skull fragments that have incisions in them related to animals are making many scientific community wonder if Gobekli Tepe was a hot spot for bizarre rituals or even grounds for a skull cult. The skull bones also show evidence of being defleshed following death. Aha! One of the skulls had a hole in it that had previously been filled with a pigment called red ochre. Wonder what that is. Ding! All of these signs point towards some of the fascination with heads by these ancient people. Well, this is ancestor veneration. That makes you wonder, who was this? Was this one of the great leaders of them, and they kept his head around so later they could keep telling you about him? So they don't have any video or anything at the time, but they'd put this guy up here, and somebody'd repeat what he said, 4 and, you know, whatever. He'd put out his little speech about him, and you know, it goes all the way through Shakespeare time, and to be or not to be, and he holds a skull, and Horatio, I knew him well. So they found these artifacts, but they found other things that are to do with boars and these dishes and things that they have that really people haven't seen a lot of, and they're going to put a lot of them in their museum that they've built there that has the little fakeness to it. And from what I understand, but this is from somebody, I don't know who the hell he is, so take it with a grain of salt. But in Germany, that are hooked up with this, they're also building one of those fake rooms, or going to build one of those fake room type things that looks just like it, and they're going to put artifacts around in it too. But of course, the main part of the artifacts are going to the other museum at first, and then they may start trading stuff around. Hell, for I don't know. But it was constructed in the pre-pottery stage. In fact, it stood before the invention of the wheel and riding, with only 5% of the site unearthed. So there's that percentage thing. So much remains unknown for now. Little evidence of home life has been found. No bowls or pots for cooking, but tools had to be used there. The site would have required some 500 men to move and manipulate the large stones. Tools would have been needed to chisel and create the discoveries found, and they haven't found any like that. And it makes you wonder if these people are smart enough that they cleaned up before they filled it up. If they're going to fill it up for a reason, then they may have not left much. And you know, a lot of people have asked me, and they'll ask everybody, well, why did they do it? Why did they bury it up? Man, that's going to be a hard question to answer. I mean, we would like to think that the reason that they did it was so later generations, if this younger Dryas event all went to crap and everybody went down, that somebody would find this someday, and then, you know, da-da-da-da. Well, you think they'd just leave it alone then, instead of burying it so nobody else could find it? Was there a selfishness in the technology that they had created, and they didn't want to leave it to somebody else when they left to go to greener pastures? It starts to get real flip-floppy there. Pardon me. on thoughts that you go with, you know. Hard to get in psychology of people that long ago. Here's where he's talking about the death cult thing, and ironically, they leave this cut off at the scorpion that's right down here. In that, in the other video I've also got some findings where they link this to the Amerindians and people in the Americas, and it's being peer reviewed and stuff. So I'm going to do a video out on it where it shows you the symbology, but it doesn't look like this. They're claiming it to be a Manus man, but I think it looks very much like the Scorpio that's seen here, which isn't seen. But this is the Vulture stele. This is Cyrus. And here's the bags that are up here and so on. And right below this, right about where my thing is now, there's a dead person without a head. And they've made inclinations about that, and the fact that there's this snake-looking thing here and the snake here, and that's got to be the comets and got to be this, that, and the other. I don't necessarily think so, but at the same time, if you had something happen like that, wham, you'd record it. Well, it was right whenever the sun was coming up through Sirius and da-da-da and everything, and people have looked at that and said, that's exactly the time of the Younger Dryas. In fact, this site seems to encompass before, during, and the end of the Younger Dryas, and then they cruise, at least what we found so far. So, big old boar that's here. Baby animals, could be ostriches, all kinds of things people have talked about, but could be baby vultures. Recent discoveries allude to the idea that skulls played some part in their religion and worship, ancestor veneration of the ancient people who grace Gobekli Tepe. Some researchers are adamant that these people had a thing with headlessness. Aside from skull fragments found at the site, depictions of people carrying skulls, which they say that lady thing right there might be carrying a skull, and you could think that could be an ancestor veneration right there, where she's carrying the skull of the ancients and everything, and she's the ancient of the group. She's the ancient of days of the group. Headless statues have also popped up at Gobekli Tepe. Were the people who roam this region into beheading in the name of belief? So there's all kinds of ideas that you can get out of it, but hunter-gatherers might not have been as nomadic as people previously thought. And by saying that, there's nomadic hunter-gatherers still and primitives still in the non-westernized areas of the world, but Gobekli Tepe shows enough of these cubicles and houses around on it that there could have been a large contingent of people that were a part of the working force, and others coming in and out. Perhaps that was where the spread of knowledge is. Somebody else had people would show up and get an idea. Well, let's build our own, and so on. But that looks odd because some of those other sites are older than this, it seems. Preliminary test. So that would say, hold on, maybe they were building all those separate ones, and then they said, let's get all together and build this badass thing. And it became a community type site. And at the end of Younger Dryas, when everything started changing radically and stuff, they left for greener pastures. So this place begs the question, were humans during this period more advanced in civilization than initially assumed? And the answer has to be yes. To build this massive place, possible worship, hundreds of people would have had to stay here, work, rest, and eat. Aside from this, researchers continue looking into the possibility that groups of people stayed in communal buildings during their lifetimes at Gobekli Tepe. Oh, they're not going to show it. Was that 10, guys? What in number 1? So you can look at a spread of advancement and stuff, and not to be just coy, but you can tell the people on the left aren't fixing to build things like this and stuff. But there's a people over on the right-hand side that after building this started building other major places, and they're the Neptunes. They ended up building a lot of the areas around the Mediterranean, which means Middle Earth to these ancient people. And Egypt itself apparently contained these Badarians also. We've shown recently in Jordan those little circles that they show deep in the Cape of South African area, and have been such a weird question that they're all up in Jordan too, and preliminary investigations on them showed them that that's the Tufians also. And so their range is not just some little place the size of Stonehenge, just like Stonehenge is not the little small range of these type people and the Proto-Indo-Europeans and things that stretch much farther east than this point here, much farther west, much farther south, and much farther north as that came available and people were able to repopulate it. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy, and we'll get on to this next part for a relating of this place with the star Sirius and ancient people and names and what they meant. Check it out. Peace.